And welcome back to Podcasters Row. What a fumble that intro to this program today. But anyway, it's Monday morning as we're recording this, and we're just going to go with it. First take. This is King of Podcasts. Thank you for listening in. kingofpodcasts.com. But today and this episode, very interesting podcast, interesting concept. And it goes as a testament to those out there that if you're looking to do a podcast, there's a reason why all of us that were probably aficionados of radio, we enjoyed what radio history's out there. Maybe you heard the kind of radio theater that was done before music radio became popularized and modernized in the 50s and 60s. But we did have a thing where, we've always heard the phrase radio is theater of the mind. And this particular podcast definitely follows that original trope. And that's the whole idea, is that I really want to just bring up both of these people on the program, these podcast hosts, because they are giving us a concept that anything can be out there. You don't have to go and reach for the highest audience possible. There is a niche that's out there that will absolutely engage and be pulled in like a gravitational pull to your podcast. So with right now, the podcast we're going to feature is called Mercury, a Broadcast of Hope, a daily audio drama podcast that tells the story of a group of people living in or around a college radio station, broadcasting during the zombie apocalypse. We're just going to hold that right there. And joining me right now is the current vice president and executive producer for the Atlanta Radio Theater Company, David Benedict, and joining is his co-host, Diana Lancaster. So both of you, Diana, David, thanks for being on.
Thanks for having us. It's going to be a good time.
Yeah, we're glad to be here.
So when you put this together, first of all, the radio background, if I just had to go ahead and start having an idea, like I've heard quite a few, I remember there was some pirate radio stations I listened to back in the day when pirate radio was still a thing before podcasting, that there would be people that would actually even play like old radio classics, like serials, or Serials, or like what people might remember soap operas from not that long ago. It was an ongoing saga of something that was going on and was done in radio. And you'd see like even there, I forget some movies that would even do that, where you'd see like the whole production being done and it was a major network. Was it the NBC, CBS, or whatever? And they did those kind of things. But this is also just another step, because I can imagine Walking Dead being a reference in here. I can imagine War of the Worlds being used in here. So when I bring up all those different inspirations, how many of those did I hit on the mark? Because what is it that really inspired this podcast?
So I want to actually go back in time, even before the beginning of Mercury, if I can,
Sure.
and talk about Atlanta Radio Theater Company broadly. So Atlanta Radio Theater Company got started in 1985 when William Brown and Patrick Stansbury decided that they wanted to bring back that old style of radio that you were just talking about, and to actually be on the radio. And back in the mid 80s, that was still possible. And so they started working with Thomas Fuller and Henry Howard to create modern audio drama. And they actually managed to get a couple of series actually on the air. That's virtually impossible today. But I've been with the group since about 1996. And so I've been working with this what I like to feel is an immersive audio environment where I'm telling a story, where I'm trying to put the listener into the story in a much more immersive way than even television and movies, because the listener has to use their own imagination to fill in a lot of the extra detail. We give them characters, we give them story, we give them dialogue, and we give them music and sound effects. But in terms of what everything looks like, the listener has to fill that in for themselves. So I had been doing that since about 1996, and decided that I was ready to do a much more ambitious project, and that's where Mercury came from. So the initial idea came from the fact that I was looking around at other audio drama podcasts and looking at which ones were successful and trying to figure out why they were successful. Why were these particular stories resonating with people so much? And what I eventually figured out was that the ones that people were really identifying with strongly were the ones that were speaking directly to the audience, as if the audience was not just a passive observer, but were actually part of the story. And so I thought, okay, I want to have a podcast where my characters are in a radio station broadcasting. And the zombie thing came because we needed some form of conflict. And I had a friend at the time named Sean who hates the zombie genre. He really doesn't like it at all because it's so grim, it's so dark, it's so bleak, and he wants to have more positive messages in the media that he consumes. And so he hates zombies. And so I thought, well, what if I told a zombie story that was more in line with what Sean is looking for, just to subvert the genre just a little bit? And so that's what we have with Mercury, is uh, a story that has a bleak setting, but also strives to deliver a hopeful message. We run a new episode every single day. We started in 2017, so today is day 2250 of our broadcast. We run a new episode every single day. And in terms of our inspirations, yes, Walking Dead factored in. Diana and I were both huge Walking Dead fans at the time, although neither of us actually finished the series.
Right.
And and beyond that, it's really just a character study to a large degree. War of the Worlds didn't really play into what I was thinking of, but
Although we did do a nod towards War of the Worlds.
I will take your word for that. After 2,000 episodes, I've forgotten it.
Well, but in a way, you can kind of feel like it's there. It's something about it's well, there's the appeal for disaster movies every year in the movie theaters, and they're big blockbuster films, and it reaches a wide audience. And that's one of the things I'm thinking about. That for a long time, there's quite a few projects that Atlanta Radio Theater Company had on traditional radio.
Mhm.
So it was either WAB, the National Public Radio, or WGST. I was looking back and seeing where it was on radio, but the thing is, I don't think it would have been a problem now if you put it on radio. It's just that the audience has moved away from that. And who knows how many people are going to engage in that kind of programming on radio now than there was before, because I think who's left of radio now, and this is a longer story for myself, because for me, podcasting was so important because it was the offshoot to radio. When radio's, I came into it 2005. And by that point, already you had all these major companies, iHeartRadio, Odyssey, that have just go ahead and consumed all the major popular stations, the high wattage, everything. They took them and basically have taken them hostage ever since.
Mhm.
And they've never been run right. There's no creativity. You see more people getting dropped off every day. And some of those people moved to podcasting.
Mhm.
And some of those that before saw the writing on the wall moved to podcasting too, because they saw, well, we can still do what we want to do. We can still have our microphone in front of us. We can still find an audience. It's just not going through AM or FM signals. So the choice of putting it on as a podcast, as opposed to seeing if this could be run up the ladder on another radio station, what was the choice on that?
Well, ARTC had a goal of being back on the radio for many, many years, and we kept running into a brick wall. The days of having like a regular programming slot were very gone. And for a little while, we were invited in by what was at the time Peach State Public Radio, now it's Georgia Public Broadcasting, to come in and do a live performance on Halloween night. And we did that for a few years, and that was super fun. But eventually they decided they didn't even want to do that with us anymore. And again, like you were saying, it's part of the market. It's market forces at work that are making the audio drama at the time less of a relevant thing. Now, today, audio drama is experiencing like a serious major league renaissance. Like audible.com is producing original audio dramas. And there are dozens, if not hundreds, of other independent producers around the country. Whereas for the majority of the time that I've been with the group, there were like three. There was like us, Bristol, Boston, place in Seattle. That was about it. But now they're everywhere because the barrier to entry is so low. Audio equipment is very affordable. If you don't have to make costumes, if you don't have to make sets, if you don't have to do all of the additional visual effects that go into a visual medium, and you can just do those with voices and sound effects, barrier to entry very, very low. And so as a result, we've gotten a lot of very good, very high quality stories being told out there that might otherwise not have seen the light of day.
But now part of the thing too is that the amount of time to go and do post-production to put this show together, there's a lot of things you do in terms of filters to make it sound like it's an older form broadcast and all, and what's being brought in. And I know this is not so much necessarily a script that you're doing, but there's obviously the plan of what talking points, what's going to be used on the program. So there's going to be something that's set for what's going to, how to start the day and end that particular day, 2,250, as you said.
Yeah.
But now, when I think about when you said Audible type programming, or Spotify, all these original podcasts are being put out there that all begat from what This American Life did back in, what was it, 2012, was
Mhm.
Serial.
Yep.
That's the one that was the key to pick the lock. Everybody said, okay, we want to do that.
Mhm.
And that's really what got the interest in podcasting. That was the swell that came across and said, wow, this is amazing. But now you could have always done a low power station, as a nonprofit. Maybe there was a way to go ahead and put the money together. But then again, the FCC costs, the kind of things were just to keep that together. It wasn't a local program. You wanted to make it where it's coming from Atlanta Radio Theater Company, but you wanted it to be a worldwide event.
Yes, and it has been. I haven't checked the stats recently, but we have at least a couple of listeners in most countries around the world. It's something I'm very, very proud of. And what's really funny is the fact that while we are the Atlanta Radio Theater Company, Mercury is actually set somewhere in the New England area, because Diana was instrumental in helping me build this world. Like, I had the root basic idea, but when it came to things like fleshing out things like setting and location, Diana was instrumental. And I want to come back to something else that you said a moment ago about the scripting. Mercury is 100% scripted. Every single one of those episodes
Oh,
is written in advance.
Hey,
Diana,
if we sound like we're off the cuff and that we're just being conversational, I'm going to take that as a win. That means our acting's on point.
so the delivery is what it is. All right. I didn't notice because it did sound like it was a little bit, it was very casual. Like
Mhm.
and the other thing too is the acting is not overly dramatic. It's not like a soap opera. It's not like that kind of overblown, over exaggerated kind of feel. You're making it where it's almost like you know what? It feels like shortwave.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yep.
It gives me the shortwave feel, and that's what I feel from that. But like it's that part. Plus, it can also, to me, when I do hear it, I do hear where a lot of podcasts also have that. I gotta ask this too. There is that approach where a lot of podcasters, and I've been using this the app called Headliner, and Spreaker was the one that was actually recommending it as part of their features that I have on my programming hosted there. And one of the things, is the free version, they make you listen to all these other podcasts, get to sample all these other podcasts. And so many of them have to go that NPR, very much that really refined, well, your diction has to be a certain way. It's just the proper way to go and speak. And the tone has to be a certain way too. I feel like there's a little bit of NPR kind of feel into that, which, like I said, I feel like the show would have been fit well as a weekend slot on an NPR station or on an NPR slot across the nation.
Mhm.
Plus, NPR podcasting does amazing. I'm surprised they even hold on the radio stations. They could do really well just doing podcasting alone. And I will say, for some big company to come in and trend set in podcasting, I give them all the credit in the world. They get my respect. They did it, and they've done it great. And that's why every podcast platform that's out there that hosts podcasts, that's why their programming is always up in the top 10. So I give them all the credit for that. Is that something where in your normal listening or viewing habits, is NPR, that style, is that something that really resonates with what made you put the show the way it is?
Yeah, NPR was definitely a big influence in terms of uh, the structure of the episodes. Every episode starts with the characters introducing themselves. After 2,000 days, it's easily possible that regular listeners, will recognize our voices and know exactly who we are.
Right.
But I always insist we start the episodes with our introductions, with our say this is who's on the air today, because we've got like 5 recurring characters. And so this is who's on the air today. And that will give like listeners a sneak preview of what the episode might be about. And then at the end, we do a sign off where we again reintroduce ourselves and reintroduce the program. Like, you've been listening to these people doing this show. So yeah, the NPR was definitely a big influence on the way we structure the intro and outro of the show. Now, what happens in the middle is different. It's so funny because when I'm writing Mercury, my biggest hurdle is always trying to figure out what the theme of the episode for the day is going to be, especially after 2,000 days. It's got to be hopeful. In the original incarnation of the show, like within the first, I want to say like 6 months, we didn't have a lot of what I would call plot. The show was about stories. It was about emotion. It was about people. It was about individual stories of survival. And over time, we have evolved to have sweeping plot lines that take, in some cases, years to resolve. We had a zombie horde that had to come through because I realized that our characters had become too comfortable. Um, and if there's no hardship, it's difficult to talk about survival in a meaningful way. So I'm like, I got to get rid of some of this infrastructure I've built. Best way to do is to have zombies come through and wipe it all out. That took months. We had the whole build up, and then we had the actual event, and then we had the aftermath, which still affects what's going on in the show today. We
And that was
had
years ago.
that
That
was
was
years
years
ago.
ago that we had that happen.
Yeah.
Wow.
And just recently, we wrapped up a storyline where we actually had different communities go to war with one another um, over a rather implausible scenario that if you want me to
And
go into it, I'll be glad to, but it's very convoluted.
but that's an example actually of how this show over the years has gone in directions we never intended for it to go. Like,
Right.
yes, we're talking about Walking Dead having been an inspiration, but from the very beginning, we were consciously going in a different direction from Walking Dead. We didn't want doom and gloom. We didn't want communities going to war against each other, but things like this take on a life of their own and they go in a direction that you don't expect. And we got to a point where we were like, they're starting a war. Like we couldn't avoid it because we had been following this storyline and getting so deep into certain issues, which are paralleling contemporary issues. And it was like, we have to go to war. We have to fight this because we can't just like brush it off and pretend this isn't happening.
Yeah, yeah.
Now you bring a point, David, and also Diane, I want to ask you about this, is that when it comes to the storylines, you're getting new audience members to listen in. I would imagine there's a lot of context that still has to be added in. I don't know if you do anything with flashbacks. Obviously, you do the previously on, but it's one of those things where to get people to go and catch up, because there's so many episodes there that are going to be behind if you're just starting to adapt into the program now. What are the things you normally do as cues to kind of help in the script writing process for those that might not have been there since day one?
Right. That was something we anticipated early on, particularly because of our unusual distribution strategy. So if anybody's looking to get into Mercury, the series is specifically designed for you to be able to jump in right now. You do not have to start with episode 1. You can jump in immediately. And what we do, I try to make this series as realistic as possible, given that we're talking about zombies, in that the episodes are only available for 24 hours. The idea being that we are supposed to be on a terrestrial radio station, and if you don't tune in, then you miss it. And that's just the way terrestrial radio works. So the episodes are only available for one day. You get your chance, and then after that, it's gone. But the other thing is, we don't do previously on. We don't do flashbacks. We do everything as if the team who is going to be on the air has just sat down in front of what is supposed to be a single microphone, even though we all have our own. And then Max, my character, flips the switch to turn the antenna on, and then we broadcast, and then we talk for about 5 to 8 minutes, and then we sign off. And so, in order to give people the context that they need, we will have the characters do recaps, and they will acknowledge the fact, like, hey, you may not have listened yesterday. If you weren't listening yesterday, here's a brief recap of what we talked about, and here's how that plays into what we're going to talk about today.
And because we have such a short episodic length, we have to be concise. There's never any 5-minute act story. It's like, here are the details you need to know, jump in on today.
Although I think there was one time where we actually spent the entire episode recapping so that we could get to the actual meat of the story the next day. But that's very rare. That's very rare. Normally, we're able to sum up what the listeners need to know for that episode within like 4 sentences.
So when I think about shows that have been long running, and you have to say to yourself, all right, even if you're gonna have people that might just catch on to the show and they have never been really into it for the longest time, one of the things that has to happen is you have to have characters across the board that will absolutely, they have to be so larger than life in some cases that that's the reason you watch, because you love this person, you hate this person. You think, what, 20 seasons of Gunsmoke? It's Matt Dillon, Miss Kitty, and people would watch, and Festus. You had characters that just resonated. If it's Dallas, I just watched all 357 episodes of Dallas for J.R. Ewing, right? For Sue Ellen, for Bobby. That's what you watch, because it was like those characters that embellish the whole show. And it doesn't matter what they're doing. You just want to see what they're doing. And then the soap operas, I grew up with my mom watching those, right? We watched Erica Kane on All My Children, and every other husband she'd have, like if you just give her a name, there's like what 9 different surnames after that. You think about, what is it? Victor Braden on Young and the Restless. So that guy's still going for 50 years, and he's 80. What is that? I saw think 80, 82 years old. That's amazing.
Mhm.
But people will still catch that show after all these years, or been watching, and a young audience comes in because the characters are so multidimensional and so well rounded, and you want to hear what this person's going to say next. So
Mhm.
would that be something where your characters, Max, or other characters that have caught the attention? Like, how do you know which audience members, what the audience wants to hear, if there's a character that needs to be killed off or is brought in?
That's interesting. So we actually have, again, the show goes in directions that you don't expect, right?
Right.
So Agnes Drew has turned out to be the character that is sort of the darling of the show. She's the character that was a student at the college when the zombies rose up. And so she's sort of the sweetheart of the show. We have actually early on in the first couple of years, we actually had a conversation about how my character, Dr. Clark, had gotten kind of flat. And we're like,
Right.
I want to flesh her out a little bit more. Like she's kind of getting one-dimensional there.
Right.
And we have a character who is not like in the core group, who's it just hops on every so often, that our audience kind of loves to hate. And like we've had times where we had finished with a storyline of her and we're like, but we can't get rid of her because
Right.
she's
Well,
such a
yeah, I
good
want to talk
character.
about Christine also because,
Christine.
yeah, so Christine Easterlin is what Diana's referring to, the character that people love to hate, and she's such an enigma. And what's funny about that character is the fact that I had like a beginning, middle, and end for that character's arc, and then I was going to be done with it. But Kitten McCreary, who plays that character, when we finished the arc, she was like, "I really like doing this. Can you please keep having Christine on the show?" And so now periodically, me and Diana have to get together and be like, "What are we going to do with Christine? Because we were kind of done, and now we got to think of something else to do with her." But she is one of the more compelling characters to write for. And what's really fun also is because Kitten does not have the schedule to be part of the core group, her character only appears occasionally, which means that we get the opportunity to talk about Christine instead of
Yeah.
necessarily having to have her on the air, where we can be like, do we really want to associate with this person? She's kind of weird. She keeps saying that she's the leader of this giant community, but we know for a fact that she's out there by herself. So things like that. In terms of characters, my my philosophy with characters is that more is more. I always want the other perspective. I always want to hear from somebody else's life experience, even if I have to
Right.
make that life experience up. This is going to be a very strange reference, but I'm going to go with it anyway. The comic strip Garfield.
Yeah.
Loved it in the early days. And when it
Yes.
debuted in the late 70s and the 80s, was one of my favorite comic strips. And over time, I grew to not like it as much. And I started to look at why that was. Because, I mean, yes, it's a comic strip. Yes, it's very one-dimensional. Garfield is not what I would call a particularly complex character. He hates Mondays and he loves lasagna.
Right.
But what I really figured out was the reason why I stopped liking Garfield was because it went from a lot of characters. You had John, you
Right.
had Lyman, you had Odie and Garfield and Nermal and Arlene and Liz the vet, and the spider was a character. Like, and eventually it got boiled down to John and Garfield.
Yeah.
And that's not what I wanted. I wanted those additional perspectives. So with Mercury, we have the core 5 characters. There's my character, Max O'Brien, who's a station manager, Dr. Rosalind Clark, Diana's character, who is the
Right.
marine biologist. We have Agnes Drew, who was the intern at the station and is also an English major. We have Jennifer Long, who lives at the lighthouse with her family. And then we have the new character, Michelle Rhimes, who is now Dr. Clark's intern, helping her with zombie research. But in addition to those, we have so many other characters that never appear on the air that we're still able to share their perspectives. We'll have people writing in letters. We'll get a letter from somebody who had this perspective on the zombie apocalypse. We have Jennifer's son Josh, who has become a major character despite the fact that he never comes on the air. We have Christine Easterlin, who makes occasional appearances. We have people living in a community nearby who, again, never appear on the air. We have a character named Gabriella Penelope Turner, who I love because she's such an experiment. Here's the deal with Gabriella Penelope Turner. If we are talking about Gabriella Penelope Turner, then a human being wrote that dialogue. If someone says Gabriella Penelope Turner said, then that dialogue was written by ChatGPT.
Right.
So it's such a, as people start trying to figure out how we're going to integrate artificial intelligence into our art, I'm like, okay, I don't want to tell ChatGPT to write a Mercury episode. I don't want to do that. I want this to be a human experience. But at the same time, I have no objection with being like, yeah, Gabriella Penelope Turner said this about this, and that in that situation, I can get the computer's perspective as well.
Now, I got to ask, when you're preparing this show, obviously you're talking about how you do create storylines. I would imagine that, for the audience's sake, they definitely want to know that you keep up continuity on storylines, so that when there's a reason for something to happen, that there's an organic, logical steps that led up to the ending there. And so often today you see so many shows, well, we can only do 4 or 5 seasons, or some shows that might not get off to a great first season on television, and they just fizzle after that because they took all the good elements of a story and they didn't figure out how to go ahead and continue after that. I think of a couple of shows that did that, and really just remember the show on ABC, Revenge, that really did a good job. And it was what a first good season, and then it just dropped completely, and they just lost their direction. Empire's another show that was on Fox, and this is when those shows could command 10, 20 million viewers on network TV. Now it's like we're used to the whole idea of, okay, we get 6, 10, 13 episodes on a streaming platform, and then whenever we're going to get another season, we'll get it. But everybody's used to such a small platform. But it's one of those things is because people are fearful. Like, as a showrunner, you gotta, like, these writers, like, look what those people on strike came from. The writers and actors strike that just came through for, what was it, 9 months, trying to go and fight to make sure about AI, make sure about the residuals they make off of it, and the writers' rooms are not going to be, torn down, and certain people are not going to be able to be a part of that writers' room. It's one of those things where, if you're going to have a show like this, I would imagine there has to be a writer's room that has storylines in place. Okay, so there's got to be the long-term planning of like a writer's room. Where are these stories going to go? I imagine, okay, you'll have what you're going to start off with and where it's supposed to end. And you just have to plot the points throughout how to get there.
It's more like the opposite.
Really?
Yeah. So
we're building the plane as we're flying it.
Yeah.
Wow.
When you talk about the writing technique, and you talk about people being plotters who like outline their story in advance before they write it, and then you have pantsers who just do it by the seat of their pants. We are the ultimate pantsers, because not only are we making it up as we go, but we have to live with the consequences of what we already did. So we do keep track of what happened, and we try really hard not to contradict something we said previously.
Right.
But in terms of having like an ongoing thing, we really don't. Getting back to that war that we were just talking about, the communities went to war. I had no idea when that war started how I was going to wrap that up. I didn't know. And as a result, it dragged on a lot longer than I wanted it to. Like I figured that I was going to get in, make my point, and then get back out. But once we actually had the communities go to war, I was like, okay, well, now I have to figure out how to do this. And until I figure out how to end it in a logical way, then we have to keep it going. And so that war went on for months longer, and I was so sick to death of it, until finally I read a book called Humankind, A Hopeful History. And unfortunately, I cannot remember the author's name, but the name of the book is Humankind, A Hopeful History. And in that book, it showed me how to end that war. And I was able to use the ideas and techniques that were presented to me in that book to be able to wrap that up. And I was so grateful. I was so grateful that I wrote to the author to say, thank you for this book, because this helped me so much with this particular part of my art. But yeah, in terms of like long-term planning, we don't do it much.
Now, what about the audience? How much do they stir the direction of the show? Like the real long-time listeners. Yeah.
Not as much as I'd like. Not as much as I want that feedback. We get contributions from a couple of very hardcore listeners, And there's another guy who I will call up periodically, and we'll bounce ideas off of each other, who he's not directly part of it, although he has submitted episodes before. But I really crave the audience feedback. I really want to. There's one guy on Twitter who will occasionally push back on some of the things that we did, and he'll be like, come on, quit acting like you're building a better society. It's the zombie apocalypse. You can't possibly be this hopeful. And I was like, and I'm like, if you aren't this hopeful, then what's the point?
Right. Well, because some people want to have that full like darkness, doom and gloom kind of feel. They want to have that because that's what they see in their movies anyway. Right now, it's like even I can't handle that much. It's just that. But I like what you're doing. This is such an ambitious effort. A daily show. Now,
A daily show.
do you normally do you take the holidays off, anything like that at all, or is it just 5 days a week?
So what we normally do is we do it in batches. We
Okay.
originally we would originally go to our recording booth, ARTC studio, which was in Tucker, Georgia at the time.
Yeah.
And we would go over there on Tuesday nights and we would record like 10 or 12 episodes, and then I would edit them, and then I would batch upload them to Libsyn where we distribute.
Right.
When COVID hit, we lost the space for that booth, and we've only recently gotten it back. And it's in a different location now, and then nobody wants to drive up there. So every Tuesday night, me and whoever else is going to be involved in the recording get on Skype. I record it locally here at my house. I'll do the editing later, batch uploads. People who are doing monologues can record on their own time. So I'll record a monologue separately from this recording session. Diana will also record separately. Not everybody has that luxury. Lissa, who plays Agnes, her schedule is so packed. We just record her monologues as part of the session, and it's fine. But doing it in batches. So like I try to stay at least 2 months ahead on the writing. I prefer to be a month ahead on the recordings and the uploads. Right now we're only 3 weeks, and it's making me nervous. But yeah, we do it all in batches. And so as a result, since we try to keep that strong backlog, we can do things like the other week, Lissa was sick. I canceled the recording session. I didn't need her to be, sick while she was trying to record.
But we also have had to adjust as we go because life happens. For example, I had heart surgery. It was unexpected. So we had to send my character off on a research trip because I was unavailable.
Yep.
You wrote her out of the script.
They had to write me out because I was in the hospital. So life happens and you have to adjust, and we've been able to roll with the punches, and and because we've been doing it for so many years, we've all gone through things like job changes, schedule changes, and we've had to just, roll with it and adjust and make it work as we go.
What a passion project. I love what you're doing here. This is it's really labor of love. I can tell, and there's a lot of work to it. It's amazing. And I see that what you did right now is very cool, is the fact that, for those who want to go and listen to the program and just help out a little bit towards the Atlanta Radio Theater, you have it as a Patreon availability, $1 a month subscription. Great. And for those who want to go and find the program initially, they can go right now to artc.org and go just for podcasts, and you'll find Mercury, a broadcast of hope. What do you do when you're trapped in a radio station during the zombie apocalypse? You help people. And again, you'll have the episodes up there initially, but then if you want to catch all the back episodes, it's on Patreon. So let me leave you to that, artc.org. And just real quickly, for those that want to go ahead and get to the Patreon part and make sure they can catch any of the backlog of episodes, what should they do?
They should go to patreon.com/Mercury Radio. And they can also follow us on Twitter. We're at Mercury870 on Twitter, which is still Twitter, by the way. It'll always be Twitter to me.
Right. No, it doesn't matter. They're going through their own apocalypse where there's constant changes, constant things going on over there anyway. So either which way, I appreciate you taking both time out. They're going to talk to me here about this. Mercury, a broadcast of hope, again, artc.org, and look at her podcast, go right from there and start from there. So thank you both for being on. I really appreciate you taking time out to go talk to me about this. This is, like I said, I wouldn't have the kind of, I do 4 podcasts a week myself. I don't even think I had the time to go and do this, but like I said, if it's all together and as a collective, how many people necessarily are working on this on a regular basis? That's a good question.
So me and Diana are doing the majority of the writing right now. We have, like I said, Lissa and Emily and Kayla, who are regularly appearing characters. But we also have, I want to say, at least another 10 people who contribute periodically. So there's probably like 15 or 20 of us
Wow.
who come and go. But what's really fun, really interesting, I just wanted to get this anecdote in there very quickly,
Sure.
is when I was leading up to the launch of the series back in October 2017, I was starting to tell people about it, starting to try to get people interested so they would listen once we launched it. And I was explaining the concept to them, and every single person had two things to say. The first was, we think that's brilliant. And the second is, what's your end game? How are you going to wrap it up? And I'm like, I haven't launched it yet. I'm going to go
Uh-huh.
as long as I can. I'm not going to talk about an end game for a daily audio drama when I haven't even launched it yet. Like, we're going to go until we can't. And I've only recently figured out how I think the series even could wrap up in a coherent fashion. But we're certainly not ready to do it. Like, I now have this little tidbit in my back pocket of how I could theoretically end the series, but we're not looking to do that. We've got so many stories to tell. This show is about people.
Don't worry about the ending right now. Absolutely. I'm sure you got a lot more people that are, as long as the interest is there, then there's no stopping the show.
Yep. Yep.
All right. David Benedict, Diane Lancaster, thanks for being on Podcasters Row. Thanks for letting me know all about the show and sharing with the audience. And folks, thank you for listening to another Podcasters Row. Again, website at kingofpodcasts.com. Find all the past episodes. And you'll find all the clips that I put up there, the preview of the shows. If you might have missed something, you want to have a reason to go ahead and find out why you should go ahead and catch the full episode. Look for me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Threads, TikTok, at King of Podcasts. And we'll talk to you next time.